The Smiling Human podcast is made possible by listeners like you. If you would like to experience more of these shows into the future, then please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/thesmilinghuman. Hello, and welcome to The Smiling Human, where collectively we evolve through inquiry. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Smiling Human podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Hazel, a community organizer residing in the southwest desert of Utah. Her educational background is in community development and sustainability under the international studies scope. She is a creative and multi-passionate individual, and it is this passion that inspired her to start her first project, the Conscious Business Network. This network was birthed to support and uplift other people with a passion for a better world, welcoming those who see that business should go hand in hand with people and the planet. Hazel is passionate about nature and ecology, recognizing that humans are a part of nature rather than above it, and thus she is consistently enlivening the understanding that true wellness is in the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical elements of life. In balancing these, we might start to create a society that embodies a richer understanding that benefits all. To this end, Hazel created Elemental Society, the anti-cult where they encourage you to think for yourself. In today's conversation, she and I speak to the elemental play of life and explore her own understanding of the nature of these elements and how they balance. I hope you enjoy. Fantastic. Well, Hazel, thank you so much for being here. I'm happy to have you on the Smiling Human podcast.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Totally. So I'll start the show off with the question I ask each guest. What is the last thing that made you smile?
The last thing that made me smile, I was just smiling. What was it about? What was it? Sorry, I wasn't prepared with this question, but I was just laughing about something, thinking it was so funny. Well, I'll tell you this, okay? This has been making me smile. This isn't the thing that it was just most recent, but every morning, I thought it was funny when I noticed this because it's been easier for me to get up in the morning, and I've been enjoying getting up in the morning and excited to get up in the morning. And I started noticing why. And the first thing is like, the sun's up. And so I get excited because I'm like, oh, I want to go get that morning sunlight. And I get excited about that. And then I hear the birds chirp. And then I that made me smile to realize that the thing that was getting me out of the bed in the morning was the sun and the birds. Like, that was just a happy thought.
How great. Yeah, that's so illuminating for our natural interwoven nature with all other life. I noticed that too, even recently. We've had, as of recording, the last 2 weeks have been a polar vortex here. To average temperature of negative 20 degrees Celsius and a couple feet of snow. It's been quite cold. But even on the days where it's been the coldest, I can still hear the sparrows and the chickadees singing outside the window. And there's almost like their song serves as the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm like, right, spring will be here. There is good things on the way. So that's really lovely. Thank you for sharing that. The audience would have had a briefer introduction to your work with the Conscious Business Network and Elemental Society. And I know that in our own conversations, I've had the privilege of hearing the dream that brought forward the Elemental Society. But perhaps if you could share the intention and structure of Elemental Society, why is it important for you to bring this into the world? And then we can dive into some of the more nitty-gritty.
Sure, yeah. So Elemental Society, essentially a society for a better world. What does that mean? What does that look like? So we call ourselves the anti-cult because we really wanted to focus on this idea of encouraging people to think for themselves. So a group of people who believe that you should have your own beliefs. And so it's been kind of fun to play off this anti-cult thing. We get together once a week to talk about philosophies. We have philosophy night, and we basically just talk about how can we create a better society. And we've really maintained this culture of encouraging disagreement. Like I get excited when somebody comes in with a new perspective because I'm like, oh, I haven't heard that before. Because then I either see where there's holes in my beliefs and like things I haven't noticed or seen before, or I understand more fully and more well-rounded why I believe what I believe. So it's just been a really cool opportunity for us to come together. And it's, I would say, focused in the air element of the mental element of wellness because we are setting the foundation, the plan, the vision, um, before we can step into the actions that need to be taken to create a better society.
Brilliant. Yeah, I had the opportunity and privilege to participate in one of those philosophy nights. And for those who know me, my background's in philosophy, so it was a very easy yes to engage with. And I had a very beautiful time there. So you mentioned the mind as the air element, the sort of visionary pieces. Walk us through the other three as the pillars for elemental society. What is it that is fire, earth, and water?
Yeah, so I mean, it really started because I was going through a really rocky health patch in my life, and I realized that health couldn't be approached from just the physical or whatever. So I kind of started to develop this philosophy. Ironically, I feel like it came through me rather than from me because the philosophy of the elements in these things are like used worldwide through different cultures throughout time, but essentially, so the mental element of wellness is air. This is where we define like your vision. That's like the main. Because so how do you write like a 36-hour course or make a 36-hour course without telling people what to believe? So it was like a framework for people to go within these different aspects of themselves to determine their own ideology. So after the air, then we go into the water element of the heart. And this is where the emotional element of wellness, and this is where you find your purpose and your deepest why. And after that, you'll drop into the fire element. And this is your passion, the spiritual element of wellness. And so we kind of get into how you find your passion is by following your desire, and then just getting really clear about what you want and being really honest about what you want and kind of breaking through those preconceived ideas about what we should want. And then the earth element, the physical element of wellness, is all about your mission. Um, and that's where we take all the inspiration from the inner elements of the mind, heart, and spirit, things that are only experienced by you. They don't exist anywhere else out externally unless you do something with your physical body on this physical earth in the earth element. So we say, make it matter, like literally make it into matter. So that's the earth element motto.
Love it. Yeah, that's so great. One of the pieces that led into my participation in the philosophy night was joining in your rewilding challenge at the beginning of the new year, where each week the group of us went through each of these elements with a practice and an intention and reflective exercises. And I found it so useful to work inside of such a quaternity because typically what I've noticed, and not just for myself, but also in my client work, that so much of our humanity is like, it's almost like we packed for a trip last minute and everything gets shoved in the same box and it's all wrapped up together and it's really hard to parse apart. So finding these pillars was quite a potent piece. And so I remember that one of the pieces we talked about, and I'd love to see if we can weave this together, is that as you are working towards birthing a vision for a new society, a new and better society, there was one of our initial conversations touched on the necessity of prioritizing individual needs, wants, and goals versus prioritizing the society and community's needs, wants, and goals, and the relationship and the balance between the two of them. And I bring this up because I wanted to ask you, when you're looking from the bird's eye view at where we are, just say in the Western world, North America, right? What do you notice about the balance of these elements in our current social structure? Do you see it tilting in one direction, an absence of one, and over reliance on the other? How does that fit into your picture and understanding?
It's a good question because I think that the obvious answer that I think most people jump to is like, yes, everyone's prioritizing themselves over community. But I think it just looks different because, um, for example, I think when people are prioritizing communal needs over self, it can be somewhat unhealthy in like people pleaser type of mentalities. And I think that there's a way where there's a good balance between the two that's healthy because that's like nothing, we don't want anything to be toxic. Like if you're toxically giving towards the community, that's not going to be good. So I think that, I don't know, I think Christian ideology kind of does tie into giving to the community and being like self sacrificing and things like that, which I think there's still. I think basically there's a pretty good balance of both. I can't say that I do see it leaning one way or the other.
Hmm. And in terms of the the balance of how passion, spirit, the material, and the mental are playing out. When you're speaking about the Christendom, the first thing that comes to mind is that there's a great deal of emphasis on the fire, on spirit. If we were to say, rather not just look at the individual, but look at the entirety of that influence, that there's a lot of fire, there's a lot of spirit, there's a lot of emphasis on that. And in some senses, there's almost a denial of the earth, because this denial of the body is, well, forgive me, but perhaps quintessential to a lot of modern post Renaissance Christian rhetoric, where the body is to be shunned or the source of sin or all these types of things. And I wonder how much of that somatic rejection is actually contributing to the malaise that we find inside of the other elements, the mind and the emotions of most people participating in society. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting concept because I think that, yeah, the denial of the earth element, that's a really good way of putting it because I mean even everything down to like sexuality, like the driving force of life is like not, it's like in general too being revolved around spirit and the fire. um it's like this, it's also like a capitalization um of the spirit. Like there's one path to spirituality and it's this route. If you follow these rules, that's the only way. So it's also kind of in a way removing you from spirit. I mean, some people can access it through those rigid guidelines, but that's why I really emphasize this whole idea of believing that everyone determines their own beliefs, and that's good because it can, like I used to just think that religious people were wrong, like, oh, you're wrong, and now I believe they are absolutely right for them in many cases, because some people need different things to access spirituality or whatever it may be, because some people need those rigid structures, some people like things to be laid out in that kind of way and then they thrive in that kind of environment. So kind of, um yeah, going off a little bit off on a tangent, but I'm kind of thinking back to this power of belief, because it's been an interesting topic to me lately. I think that this idea, because like we kind of, the funny thing about beliefs is we just kind of wake up one day and realize that we have them. Like, and then you're like, whoa, I believe that. But it doesn't mean that we don't have a choice in the matter. It's just a matter of making it conscious and recognizing it. And I think that's kind of one of the important pieces of philosophy because it's like then you get to determine your own beliefs and ideologies and different things, and then yeah, determine if it's something that you want to believe. Like for example, I have a belief that I've been working through, that, well, a couple, that I've kind of, because I've been focusing on this, like beliefs really are an interesting topic. And so one of the beliefs that I have is that I'm bad at sales, or one of the beliefs that I'm working through, I should say, because I'm trying to pivot, but and that people want to listen to me. That's a belief I'm trying to believe. because up to this point, even if it was true that people don't want to listen, I made it true because I believe that. And so I've been, just focusing on that, unmuting myself, standing up for what I believe in, speaking up, or what I want to believe in, rather, because I think that, it's empowering to realize that even though these beliefs just kind of show up, then once you recognize them, change them.
Hmm. It's quite potent. There's a lot of pieces there that I think are quite relevant in respect to the goal and aim of elemental society. When we're speaking about belief, it's quite funny. We do really wake up and go, oh, I just have all of these notions that have somehow been concretized inside my mind. And I would be so bold as to say that the lack of inquiry towards our own beliefs, individually and culturally, is at the heart of so much social dissonance. That is to say, it is easier not to examine what we believe, particularly because our beliefs tend to be wrapped up in our emotions as well. And they tend to be quite evocative of that sense. And maybe they're tied into our sense of self and our persona. And it's easier to allow those to be dictated for us by culture, by media, by family, rather than taking on the full weight of responsibility to do an inventory, do an audit of beliefs, and actually test which ones fit. And this testing is an interesting domain because on the one hand, I want to say we can measure the value that a belief brings forward by the fruit of the actions it leads to. So in your case, when you're speaking about sales and you're speaking about the desire for people to receive you in your expression, let me say this, that we can't actually believe, we can't know a lie. We can only believe a lie, right? We can only know the truth, but we can believe the truth and we can believe lies. And so effectively, it doesn't matter what we know because whatever we're choosing to believe will be the structure upon which we shape our habits, actions, and reactions. And
Yes.
so, like you said, you are making it real for yourself by allowing to remain. And so when we take this sort of bird's eye view, we take a step back and we look at, racial tensions, we look at the growing wealth disparity, inequity between all sorts of different subgroups across Western culture and across the global culture at large. I'm thinking to myself, what would happen if we all took a second and thought, what are we accepting about the world and about ourselves mentally that is perpetuating this particular structure that begets suffering? And so that's one of the pieces that came to my mind here is just the absolute necessity that we all have to take up that responsibility, to have a peek. Why is it that we believe this and what kind of fruits are these actions, these beliefs bearing rather?
That's a really good thought to build off of because I'm thinking back to the importance of philosophy in building a better society. And that hits the nail on the head because, like, yes, our thoughts, first, our actions start as thoughts. So just like identifying, but then also like, realizing the cultural and, the programming that just like exists in the beliefs that are just kind of embedded. And I think that that's one of the important arguments for philosophy is like they don't want us to think for ourselves necessarily. The people who are causing the corruption and all of the evil in the world, it's better for them if we just fall into this agenda of um, whatever they want us to do. So
Compliance.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel particularly vitalized when I hear you say philosophy is necessary for a better society because when I was in university, people are like, "What are you going to do with your degree?" And I'm like, think, I suppose. But in actuality, it is quite true that the only way that we can continue to live how we are living as individuals or in communities is if we continue to think the way that we're thinking and continue to feel the way that we're feeling and to act the way that we're acting. And so when I think about the four elements here, philosophy does begin, or as is at least placed more primarily in the air element, obviously because it is psyche, it is Sophia, wisdom, there's this mental element to it. But one of the pieces that we've spoken to a little bit when we were talking about merging the energy of the philosophy circle and the rewilding challenge, which is bringing the heart to the mind and the mind to the heart, is that the contents, the experiences that underpin our philosophies have to be embodied. We cannot move through the world on theory alone. And this is why when I was talking about an overemphasis on fire and an underemphasis on earth in the sort of Christian influence on Western culture, that really shakes me, because what I have come to learn through facilitation, through mentorship, coaching, my own, and also giving, and all of these different avenues of study and experience, is that our emotional body, our emotional experience, is just as real and just as meaningful, meaning rich, as any sensory experience we could have through the body or any mental epiphany that might come to us through contemplation or discourse. And so I see in your work the bridging between these elements. Yes, we've siloed them and we've created a quaternity where we can focus on these isolated pieces, but also merging them. What is it like to have the balance of these is something that I feel quite excited about when I first found Elemental Society.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love to think of that just like visualizing the earth, like the water is part of the earth, the air is part of the earth, fire, it all works in tandem and together. Like you can't just have one or else life doesn't exist. And so, yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I was going to see if I could try and quote it, but I'm not even going to try. But I know that there's a lot of indigenous wisdom that ties into that, like that if you're putting too much burden on the mind, then your spirit will like carry that, you know.
Mm.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
but kind of going back to what you were saying about this question that you posed about like how we think and how it contributes to the society we live in. Can you say that again, that question?
Right. The question or the answer, I suppose. What's
Yeah.
coming to me is the piece around, if we hope to change social structure or society, we can't hope to do so unless we change how we think and change how we feel and change how we act, right? So long as we continue to think the same way, our actions will remain the same, our feelings will remain the same, and so too will the structures. And so by having the courage to confront where we are willingly ignoring that belief audit, that's where we start to make those shifts. Because it takes individuals like you and I, and you, dear listener, pausing for a moment and going, is that right? Do I really think that that's true? And if I think that's true, how am I going to act? How do I act this out in a day, in a month, in a year? What are the real lived embodied somatic consequences of taking this to be true? And that sounds like a big question, right? It sounds like a lot of work, but changing a society, changing the course of social growth is no small thing. So it really takes the collective operation of all humans as perhaps cells in the organism to allow for any kind of trajectory change to take place on that individual and collective level.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, because an example that comes to mind, I think collectively, um, where we kind of are energetically feeding the 1%, is that we kind of buy into this mindset that like I need to prove myself. I need to be better than everyone. I need to do a really good job at what I do so that I can be better than. And like it's subconscious and it's real. Like we experience that. But I think that it's feeding into that same mindset that we're really wanting to disassemble, kind of like um, never having enough for one. Because like that to me is something that it just continuously blows my mind that you could have billions upon billions of dollars literally you can buy anything and everything that you want and still thinking the only thing you can think about is how can I make more? Like that is an energetic thing that I see a lot of us feeding into. And that's like just a specific example that came up when you said that. Um, but it's important to look at these things and be like, how am I contributing to this society at large with the way that I am thinking and the way that I'm acting and various things?
That reminds me of the work of Charles Eisenstein in his book, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, where he speaks about the two worlds, one that is based in scarcity and separation, and the other based in interdependence and abundance. And I think we can take your elemental quaternity, or yours, the elemental quaternity that you've so eloquently put into your course and into your society, and look at it as bidirectional in a sense. We've been talking a lot about this belief audit and the necessity of critical thinking. That's the inward trajectory. What are my beliefs? What are my thoughts? What are my passions? What are my needs? What are my skills, etc.? The locus is on the individual. But there's another direction, which is to say, how am I engaging with the passion of the culture? How am I engaging with the mental zeitgeist of society? How am I engaging with the material around us? And when we start to recognize that all aspects of our humanity are necessarily reflected in the relationship we have with our environment, that scarcity falls away. This has been my experience, and I genuinely believe this, because when we're looking out at the world, at no point, I mean, unless you've drowned, and heaven forbid no one drowns, please, at least not while listening to this, there's ample air all the time, forever and ever. There's enough water for everybody to drink. There's enough land on earth for everybody to have enough food and shelter. Like, we are so deeply and fundamentally provided for in excess by the natural world that it is only through our misunderstanding of ourselves and our intricate and innate relationship to the living world that we start to live in and project the sense of scarcity, which then promotes greed, isolation, and competition, which was a very interesting piece that you brought up, because there's a delicate balance between the desire to compete and the desire to grow. This is one of the pieces I've been playing with. And one of the quotes that comes to mind, and if someone who's listening knows who said this, go ahead and leave it in the comments, because I can't remember for darn. But your only competitor should be yourself, your yesterday self, right? Am I more open, more honest, more genuine, more compassionate, more virtuous than I was yesterday? Am I living more truthfully, more clearly aligned with my values, rather than, am I making more money than Hazel? Am I getting more followers, or et cetera, right? As soon as we project the scarcity or the need to be better than, we've already entered into an ethos that is resting on that deception of separation. And I think that that's really what is causing the quakes overall socially. We're all trying to reach across to find one another. And yet all of the signals we're getting through media is saying, oh, no, you are islands. You are islands. There's nothing between you. It's like, smells like a lie to me.
Yeah. Well, I love that you say that, because it's true that we are all so different. And so to compare is so, it doesn't even make sense, but we all do it. But that's something that I have been thinking about as well lately. Just the idea that, like, we literally can claim success now. Like all the things you want to do and accomplish and achieve, for what? So that you can feel what? So that you can have more time with your family, so that you can have more freedom. All these things that you can claim now, today. You can have more time by not stressing yourself out trying to get to these end goals of things. You can claim all of these things now. So the abundance is real. Like, you can literally claim, um, like, as long as you're working in alignment with your values now, then you can claim success now.
And I think what I would encourage our listeners to do, if they haven't already had a peek at your website and some of your content, is reflect on these four pillars in relationship to what we're speaking to. Where am I telling myself there's lack? Where am I pushing the sense of it needs to be different? Do I want to feel differently? Do I want to have something different? Do my thoughts produce the kind of experience and belief that are leading me towards this sense of success and abundance and inner alignment? Right? It's really that audit where we own just absolute full accountability for all aspects of our experience without blame that allows us to take the first steps into making those shifts. And I love how you said everybody's so different, because it's a paradox, really, when we look out at the world, because in some sense we all share common ancestors. Most of our DNA is the same. The structure of our psyches are quite similar, despite our temperament being measurably different across cultures and across age ranges. And yet, in all of this uniqueness, we're all striving to live a good life, a life that's good for us and a life that we believe is necessary, right? Or not necessary, necessarily good, that brings something of value. And the balancing of those two pieces, I think, is one other way that we can label that intersection between balancing the needs, wants, and desires of the individual and of society. It's like, that's what we're looking at, is the paradox of uniqueness and similitude in some real sense.
Absolutely. I love that you said that. The reason why I brought up the differences is because I really value those differences. I often use this analogy in my own head of just like that's why I encourage disagreement, because those differences are the things that increase the biodiversity of our soil, our community
Mm-hmm.
soil. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have this respect for these differences, because that's why the idea of comparing to somebody else is because like I truly see like everyone has this special like little light that it cannot be compared with another. It's just, their spirit shines in their own unique little um, difference. So
Mm. Well, to all the unique, shining listeners, we're going to take a short break and we will come back with the second half of the show. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I wanted to take a brief moment to talk about just how you can help this show grow into the future. Did you know that we have an Instagram, a YouTube, and a Patreon? Probably. But if you're listening on YouTube, like many of you are, I would invite you to subscribe, to like this video if you've enjoyed it, and to leave a comment. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if you have any questions or maybe guests that you want me to interview. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music or any other podcast platform, then please take this moment to rate the show. All of these actions go a long way to helping the Smiling Human podcast reach more people and grow into the future. Thank you so much. Fantastic. So we are back here with the second half of the show, which means we are now in the section called the Question of the Week. This is where I invite our guests to bring forward an inquiry, something that's meaningful to them. Maybe they want my take on it, or they think it would be beneficial for you to hear us discuss. So, Hazel, what have you got for us this week?
yeah, so I've been really interested in this idea that you proposed of stewardship versus governance. So I want to ask, how do you see these two energies of governance and stewardship playing out in the co-creation of community and culture?
Potent energies indeed. I know we've spoken to stewardship and the shift away from the dictatorial energies of governance, which is to say that there's a leader who says how things ought to be and sets the structure forward for a group. And this can be quite a meaningful way to operate, particularly in facilitation or when there's a direct goal, if it's a hiking guide or something like this. But in the broader sense of relation, which expands out into community and therefore is the carrier of culture, stewardship for me relates a little bit differently, because stewardship is no longer about being the one to lead, but it is rather about embodying all of our responsibilities in such a way that we demonstrate, we lead by example rather than by dictate. And I think that that's a really crucial difference, because no longer is there one person in the seat who can fall prey to egoism or narcissism or tyranny, or their ignorance and folly ends up harming the collective, but rather it's all about their own responsibility. And so when I look at the co-creation of community and stewardship, there's a beautiful blending that takes place where when I'm looking at stewardship, I'm looking at how do I steward my responsibilities, and I'm also including the health of the community as a part of what I'm stewarding. And this is where we move beyond the individual. So it's not about, hey, everybody, we need to get along this way, and we're not going to say these things, and we're going to sing this song, and we're not going to do this thing. But it's more about, when I'm moving through the world, how can I conduct myself through these four elements, through my emotions, my mind, my body, and my spirit, in such a way that I am leading myself, and as a consequence, allowing the path to be more accessible for all others. That's kind of how it lands for me, is that it's about picking up and holding the vision of not only my own future self's good, but what is going to be beneficial for humanity, be it the 30 people that I'm having a potluck with, or the 300 people that come to a festival event that I am hosting, or the 3 million people in the city. All of that has to be orbiting around the same piece. It's not about me dictating, but it's about carrying that vision of a healthier community into the future.
Yeah, you did a really good job of defining that, because I've been struggling to put that into words, the difference between stewardship and governing. Because my thought is like, well, stewardship is caring about and being a caretaker of this thing. But governing is not necessarily not caring. It's just kind of saying these are the rules and regulations of the thing we care about. um, so I love that you kind of finished it with that idea of how it does tie in community and culture as well, because that's kind of been my um, interest lately, is in building community and trying to do that from this perspective of empowering the community to contribute to culture, rather than me governing and being like, this is how things run, to just be like, huh, what do you think? How would you do this? Or even like giving people leadership positions to show up and have an opportunity to contribute. And because the culture is truly created by the people that are there. So that's where my mind went with it. But I'm thinking of this example in the US recently. They fired a bunch of national parks employees. So a lot of people have been really scared about what that's going to look like for like our protected land. And I really love this idea of like a common consent, like a consensus where everyone's on the same page. Because I used to think that a true democracy was pretty much the best. That was top tier. You get a vote, and whoever loses the vote, too bad. But the majority rules. But a common consensus or a common consent where everyone's on the same page. And that's where the culture piece kind of comes in, because once everyone's on the same page, so say, yeah, no one's governing whether or not you're going to litter in the national parks, or pack your trash out because no one's taking out the trash bins or whatever, but we have this common consent. Like, how beautiful, just picture it, that everyone is on the same page, that we care about our public lands, and that the fast tracking, like the success when everyone is on the same page about what we care about. And I think that really is speaking to what you described with this stewardship and leading by example, but also leaving room to invite others into that care.
Mm-hmm. I think the main piece that stands out for me, based on what you've shared regarding common consensus, is the difference in authority between stewardship and governance. It's not that any one individual loses authority when they're in that stewardship role. And it's not as though anyone is unable to maybe enforce consequences, but it's that the authority is decentralized. And I think that that's a really stabilizing principle when we're talking about particularly the stewardship of land, the stewardship of culture, of communities, of resources, is that when we are in this role as stewards, we are all accepting the collective responsibility as individuals for the health and wellness of whatever it is that we are stewarding. And so authority is given to us to speak up, to take actions towards that end, to ask questions, to propose meaningful changes, these types of things. And it is, again, diffused, just like you said at the beginning of our conversation in regards to the philosophy nights. Disagreement allows us to have a clearer picture of the best way that we could be stewarding the land, the resources, the people, the culture, the myth, the lineage, whatever it might be. And I think that this also removes the risk of the abdication of personal power and personal responsibility. Because when we do centralize authority, this is from where the dictates come. This person is the one that's going to enforce the law, so to say. Then all other people can go, oh, I'm just following the rules. My hands are clean. When in actuality, we know this probably because we've talked about it and we've thought about it at length, but even those who live under a dictatorial tyranny are culpable and responsible for the culture because they still have dominion over their actions. And that recognition that every individual never loses dominion over their willpower, their choice, is what underlies the structure of stewardship as far as I understand it. It really brings that up. Hey, all of us have the ability, power to influence how this turns out. And therefore, we're all going to be equally culpable if something goes wrong. So let's take that and put that front and center. How do we actualize our responsibilities to fulfillment in such a way that we are distributing the labor necessary to make a more positive world, while also broadening the scope of the benefit of that particular end? And it's a really, really powerful way. And it doesn't fit in current culture. People don't really understand stewardship because we've been dictated to for how many hundreds and hundreds of years. So I appreciate you bringing that consensus to the table.
Yeah, well, I love that you said that because one, it does speak to the power of community and how empowered we are as individuals, which I think is so important in the narrative of building a better society. Because otherwise, it's just the world's going to crap in every direction. To know how empowered you are, and that is a really good point because, for example, like public restrooms, like it's not required that you wash your hand, but the culture, or you wash your hands, but the culture kind of enforces that. And so I think that the more that we have our values front and centered, we unmute ourselves, speak up, and stand up for what we believe in, then that is you using your power, reclaiming your power, like, and realizing that we have power for creating a better society. And so I really do appreciate that you bring in the hierarchy piece and the distribution of power, just taking it out of the hands of the ones at the top saying, this is how things are, and realizing that each one of us has power and responsibility to do what we believe in.
Mm-hmm. To all listeners, you are absolutely morally obligated to wash your hands after using the public restroom, just so you know. There's no question about that. And I appreciate that you can bring the idea of hierarchy in too, and that we're able to examine both a hierarchical system and a decentralized one without putting either one up or down. Because it is very clear that in some circumstances, having a dictatorial hierarchy, not a tyranny, but someone who is at the peak and disseminating these kinds of instructions is really necessary. It's the only way to get things done. This is why we have management hierarchies. This is why we have planners. We have people who are experts in their field who can say, hey, this is a really good idea. That's a really bad one. Go in this direction or we're going to suffer, right? What that does, and it's kind of ironic, given what's taking place in the United States right now, is that there is this dictatorial hierarchy, this authoritarian hierarchy that's not based on competence. And this is what I think is so, oh, it's a dark comedy in some senses, because we are looking out at what could be an opportunity for unity. How do we come together as Americans? How do we come together as Canadians? As whatever unifying factor we have, looking at those different unifying factors, identifying what the responsibilities attached to each one are, and then asking the question, okay, what's our next step? What's our next step towards collective benefit that includes earth, water, air, all of the more than human world out there, all of our non-human kin? And one of the things that I think I want to reiterate, and forgive me if this is hitting the nail again, but when we integrate the needs of all life outside of ourselves, so this is community, this is family, this is society, this is the more than human world, when we integrate the needs of life that's external to us without sacrificing our own needs, that to me is the path of wisdom. It's striking the balance. And I bring the word wisdom in because we had briefly touched at the first half on the necessity and use of philosophy for generating a better world. Well, what the hell does philosophy mean? Philosophia. It's the love of wisdom. It's the pursuit of wisdom. And we can bring this idea of wisdom not just in the air element, but what does it mean to feel wisely? Not to think oneself to be wise or to feel as though we have wisdom, but to relate to our feeling body and the feeling nature of others wisely. What does it mean to work with the material world, to engage with our resources wisely, to engage wisely with spirit and our creator? All of these pieces to me speak about integration. Taking this whole picture includes society, family, etc., all of these pieces we've touched on, and allowing those to inform why we believe what we believe, why we do what we do, why we pursue the things that we pursue, and what we ought to be doing collectively to bring forward this kind of change that we desperately need.
Yeah, I love that you say that because I think that's a really good point when it comes to why we need philosophy in creating a better society. Like, there was a time, like indigenous societies, where there was a certain kind of wisdom and connection to the land and the world around us that existed, that was kind of just passed on and taught. And now we live in a much more disconnected world. So to reestablish our connection in the world and to other people and other animals and plants and just the land, absolutely, because it's kind of like we were brought into a disconnected society. And so to reestablish that connection and bringing it back, to the wisdom piece, I think it's definitely relevant. So I really like that you brought that up.
Mm. And we can find that reconnection, that reestablishing of wisdom through building a relationship with the elements, inside and out, and in their literal form. It's like there's something hypnotizing about staring into a fire, building a fire, right? Listening to the sound of a river or the wind on the lake or the ocean shore, right? There's so many pieces that when we turn our attention to them, remind us of the ways of the elders. They bring us
Yeah.
back into that wisdom. And I think that that's one of the things I love so much about the format of Elemental Society. It's like, hey, there's places we can listen.
Yeah, and that's how we begin to get connected. You can literally take each one of the elements, like establishing a connection to your heat source, fire, right? Or how you cook your food. Like if you were to cook over a fire or whatever, it's like you're and it's getting connected to the earth. Like if you have that connection to your food source, um, or even water. Like we just turn on the tap and the water comes out and we throw our trash out and it disappears. Like we lose the connection to what's actually happening and our consequences to our actions. So the more that we can begin to establish those connections again, And yes, the elements, absolutely. That's the best, in my opinion, the best place to start.
Mm-hmm. Well, the most accessible, right? These are the things that have kept us and been our dearest companions since time immemorial. No one of our ancestors has made it without air, water, the earth, or the fires. And that's something I think we can be quite grateful for. So I am grateful for your time today, Hazel. This has been a lovely conversation. And for those of our listeners who are inspired by your words and by the philosophy we've been able to exchange today and want to learn more about elemental society and how to get involved, where can they find you?
So Instagram's probably the best place. Elemental Society. Yeah, let's get connected there. We also have a Facebook page. That's probably the best place. So we can stay connected. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Um, Anyone who is aligned, because the truth is, it's not for everyone. There's a few people, that are just waking up, and I think that these people, you included, who are waking up to just being more conscious to all of these different ideas. We need to come together. We need to form an alliance. We all believe that we want a better world. It may look different in the approach of how we think that should be done, but the people who believe in a better world, let's form an alliance, come together, join forces, and empower each other to create a better world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All the links for Hazel's information will be in the show description as always. Thank you so much for being a part of the Smiling Human podcast, Hazel. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And that concludes this episode of the Smiling Human podcast. Thank you so much for listening. But before you go, I have 2 invitations for you. The first invitation is to receive a free gift. I've created a free insight journal. This is a 30-day self-reflection and introspection journal that you can download at no cost in the description below. Go have a look and join the journey. The second invitation I have for you is, if it feels within your means and possible for you, then please head over to patreon.com/thesmilinghuman. Becoming a patron will give you access to perks like behind-the-scenes footage and access to live Q&As with me monthly. You also get voting privileges to help pick new guests or to help guide other episode content. Truly, the support of listeners like you, paid or unpaid, goes a long way. So if you could like, share, subscribe, and give a rating on the podcast app, all of that goes a long way. Thank you to each and every one of you who's been on this journey with me. See you again soon.